Where are these activists from? Are they were they acting in their home state, or did they come from somewhere else?
All of us came from the West Coast. Annette and Emily that did the action in Minnesota live in Seattle. In North Dakota, Michael is also from Seattle. Montana, I was born in Eugene, Oregon, and have lived in Oregon all my life. And in Washington, Ken Ward lives outside of Portland, Oregon. He actually was born on the East Coast and grew up in Massachusetts.
And so a follow-up to that is the attorneys that are going to work with you on this. It's county or district court cases.
District Court.
Are the attorneys from that area that are?
Yes, I don't know if, can everyone hear the question?
No.
No? So the question is, how about the attorneys? Where are they from? So my attorney is from Bozeman, and Reed's attorney, I think, I'm not sure, might be from Helena. Am I saying that right? Yeah. Helena. So the broader answer is that we were required to have attorneys that are licensed, to the bar in the state and the county.
And you must have talked to some attorneys and heard about the necessity of defense ahead of time?
Not as much as we should have. We definitely reached out ahead of time and thought that we had a sufficient plan to get attorneys in place for all of us. There's an organization out of Eugene, Oregon called the Civil Liberties Defense Center. You may have heard of them. They're very active in defending activists and other folks' civil rights. They are spending a week a month in Standing Rock in North Dakota, and have brought a class action lawsuit against the Morton County Sheriff's Department and the governor of North Dakota and the state for the constitutional civil rights violations that have happened. And that's the kind of work that they do routinely. They're coordinating our defense with each of the attorneys in the local jurisdictions. There's also a organization, a new one called the Climate Defense Project. It's a group of 3 new attorneys. They have passed the bar but actually haven't been licensed yet, who are specializing in the necessity defense and in climate change law.
I'm curious, can you give some background in your planning efforts, how you decided to select these pipelines versus coal-generated plants, oil refineries? How long ago did you start moving toward that, and just give a sense of planning. How did you get to that?
Sure. So the question is, how did we end up choosing the target of the action being the pipelines instead of some other fossil fuel infrastructure? And what did the planning look like? How long did it take? And that kind of thing. So several of us in the group took part in an action back in May that was part of the Global Break Free call to action from 350.org. And it was up in Anacortes, Washington. It was quite successful. It had 4, I guess, basic components. It had a very large community education segment that was held in a large transit shed in Anacortes. It had a long march around a point where the 2 refineries, Shell and Tesoro, are. That was very beautiful. It had a landing of Lummi and other indigenous people's canoes along with kayaks in a kayaktivism event. There was a camp out at a place called Deception Pass that was maybe close to 1,000 people. And there were about 200 of us that camped on the railway spur carrying unit oil trains to the refineries. And so it was about a 52-hour blockade, and there were 52 of us arrested. And so that's, we thought about and may pursue the necessity defense for that action. There's about 30 of us that are going forward to jury trials in that action. And where was I going with that? What we found is that the fact set, what the attorneys call a set of facts in the case, are not the best match for the necessity defense. In all the states, there are now very specific criteria that have to be met that a judge looks at before they even allow the necessity defense to be presented. And so we began to work after May on what an action would look like that would more perfectly fit the fact set and may compel a judge to allow that defense. And so that was sort of our blueprint, was looking at what we could do that would better match that. One of the criteria is that you have to actually stop the harm that you're trying to prevent. And we were actually able to stop the flow of the oil. And there were the other alternatives we evaluated really didn't meet the criteria. That turned out to be one of the toughest to meet. Beyond that, there was no way that we wanted our action to put either people or the environment at risk. And so we did many months of research. We interviewed former pipeline safety inspectors. We learned a lot about pipelines and pipeline safety, about where the block valves were located and why, how the pressure was different the closer or farther away that you got from a pumping station along the pipeline, those kinds of things. And so we did 3 separate scouting trips along the routes of pipelines. As you can imagine, the block valve sites aren't something that are just real easy to go to the library and look up in a book. We had to do quite a lot of research. And so we picked block valves that were at least 10 miles from a pumping station so that the pressure in the pipe line would be less at that point. For the Enbridge line, we wanted a site where both the line 4 and line 67 valve were at the same location. And we had other criteria. And so it took clear from that May action in Anacortes to last month before last now, before we felt we were ready. We all met in Seattle on the 9th of October, and even at that point, we were not absolutely positive that all of us were in agreement that we were ready to go forward. And so we reviewed all that we had learned. We went over our plan. We went over the sequence of how we wanted it to play out, what the safety precautions were, and needed to have everyone that was subject to these potential felony charges to be in agreement that we were ready to go. And so we agreed that we were, and headed out then to the respective sites and did the action. That's what the planning looked like.
Leonard, did it go as well as you wanted it to go?
Yes, it individually, the biggest worry that it seems like was most common was that we wouldn't be able to hold up our end, that something would go wrong and either we wouldn't be able to get in the enclosure or not find the right method for closing the valve or that kind of thing. But all of our research paid off, and we knew what we were doing, and it went without a hitch. Really the only thing that was different is that it took a lot longer for law enforcement to arrive than we thought that it would.
So that was a question, like, if you had decided to just drive away, could you have?
It seems very likely, it didn't fit our full plan for the action. But for instance, I waited about an hour and a half for deputies to I started getting pretty cold.
And was there a reason for that, rather than just sort of,
Yes, yeah, one could argue that, doing the action in more of a guerrilla kind of fashion where you do it here and show them somewhere else and you do it there and that kind of thing might be a better use of us as a resource. But it's really, we were not going for the disruption to the business of the pipeline company so much as we were to reaching out to the public and asking them to take away the social license for these companies to continue to do what they're doing. We didn't believe that any kind of a monkey wrenching kind of approach was going to be effective. We felt that would bring a more repressive response. So even though we did damage some property, we cut through the chains to get in, and we interrupted the flow of the oil. We were looking for as nonviolent yet effective way, meeting the criteria of the necessity defense that we could accomplish. And we were looking at the public outreach and the necessity defense trials themselves as the most effective part of what we did.
I am admiring your work, and I'm wondering what kind of public outreach have you done so that this isn't effective?
Can you repeat?
And so the question is, what kind of public outreach are we doing to try to get the word out? And so we really haven't made it into mainstream news yet the way that we hope. We're continuing to work on that. I don't know how many of you watch Amy Goodman on Democracy Now! We were on great reporting. We were on that the day after the action. We were in Reuters and many newspapers. King 5 TV in Seattle did a special report, an interview with all 5 of us. I had never watched The Young Turks before. Anybody heard of that show? One of our group, Ken Ward, was interviewed by Wesley Clark Jr. We're doing our best to break into mainstream media with this story and expect that the trials will help us do that.
Leonard, could I say something on that? 4 of us from Missoula drove over to Fort Benton yesterday to be in the courtroom. We were the only 4 people in the courtroom other than Leonard and his attorney. And I think the next time that Leonard comes up for a legal procedure, it would be really nice to have 40 or 50 people in that courtroom from Missoula and from all over the state. And then the next time that Leonard comes up for another court appearance, that we have 500 people in that courtroom. That'll get attention. And I think it's up to us to make sure that the risks that Leonard has taken is reported and the word is spread out. So, that's something that 350 Missoula is going to work for, is to bring supporters from here to Fort Benton.
One thing you probably already know is that in connection with the Standing Rock action, nothing was happening on the national and mainstream news. And then it went on Facebook, and we were all asked to contact, Lawrence O'Donnell or whoever, right?
And
And I
so,
think a lot of people sent emails or phoned up and said, you know, there's something going on here. And actually, when it came into national news, it was though it had just sprung from yesterday,
Yes.
something like that.
and so folks that can't hear, she was pointing out how the Standing Rock encampment and what was happening there, the only place that you could really find out about it was on Facebook or on Democracy Now! And that they encouraged people to call and to reach out personally, and that over time, the story finally broke. You had your hand up before, and then I'll get back there to you.
The video that you showed us where everybody went and did the procedure, is that available to the public online at Shut It Down today?
Not yet. As you can see, it's still kind of rough. We actually have hired a PR company that does this kind of work, and they're going to help us finish this and try to get it out in a big way.
Well, if you can put that to where we can post it on Facebook, on each of our pages, and help get it out there for exposure.
Definitely, we will do that. Our website is shutitdown.today. I'd never seen that extension, it's instead of .com or .org, it's .today. And so it's Shut It Down Today. And we have a Facebook page that's called Shut It Down Climate Direct Action. And so, yeah, we definitely appreciate your support. We've been posting the different arraignments and court happenings and supporting Standing Rock as well from there. And yeah, we're open. Any help if you folks know newspaper or TV reporters and could help, get us a story. We're definitely following those leads. That's how we got the King 5 TV report in Seattle.
How are you funding yourself?
By donations. We have a donate button on the Shut It Down Today website. And as part of our outreach, we're doing community gatherings like this. In Oregon, we did one in Hood River. We did one in Portland. We've got one coming up the 12th in Seattle. Angela and I went to Sandpoint, and we went to Moscow. And we're taking donations at each of those gatherings.
Because your legal costs are going to be
Right, yes.
your biggest burden, right?
Definitely, yeah. Did I take a question from you yet? No, go ahead.
Actually, a couple things. The White House petitions, when the Standing Rock petition was first put up, they limited it at 100,000 signatures or what was required. By the time that it passed through the time frame, there were over 250,000 signatures. So just forwarding the link for the White House petitions. I also sent you a link from not Department of Defense, diversity. It's a GIS of all the skills for the pipelines.
I don't know, that sounds really helpful, yeah.
Yes, and
both-
it's a cumulative since 1986. Kate, I don't know if you remember the date range on that.
1984, I think, is when it started,
1984.
somewhere around there.
It lends a great deal of gravitas when you look at an animation that is factually based from a GIS that shows the cumulative spills, just the pipeline spills.
That's
Since
not it's
1984.
not if they're gonna spill, it's when.
Right.
And it's
So,
also the deaths and injuries that have been associated with this.
yes, it also shows
Yeah.
deaths, injuries, locations.
It's a
And
time
those that are
lapse.
posted in the GIS are simply those that were considered notable or
Yeah.
exceptional.
Significant.
So that was, what is the diversity? Biodiversity?
Oh.
It is
Yeah,
biodiversity.
Yeah, what's the name of that?
Yes.
organization?
Center
The Center for
Biological.
Biodiversity, yes.
So anyway, they're the ones who did it, and they're exceptionally thorough. So,
Thank you.
And one more thing regarding, letters to the editor. New York Times takes letters to the editor, or op-ed pieces from anybody. So if you feel moved, all they can do is say no. So,
And I think local newspapers as
Oh,
well
yeah,
will help my case, yeah.
Washington Post, New York Times, I mean, they're all up there, so.
Got a question here.
Leonard, our group, 350 Missoula, in our mission statement, we say, we're pretty upfront about supporting nonviolent civil disobedience as a means for accomplishing our goals. I think what you've done is kind of brought up, for me anyways, and I know some other members of our group, is, well, what's nonviolent? What's it mean? And how did you come about figuring out, like, where's the line? Where do you draw the line about what's violent and nonviolent?
So our action was prayerful and very non-adversarial. I mean, in terms of whether it was interactions with the pipeline company or interactions with law enforcement, we treated them with the same dignity that we would anyone. I'm sure you folks have been in demonstrations or protests where you saw protesters calling policemen pigs or making other derogatory comments, dehumanizing basically the people that they see as adversaries. And I think that that's in part what makes our action nonviolent, because I don't believe violence is limited just to physical actions. I believe what we say and the way we treat people very definitely can be violent. There's this concept called microaggressions, and just in a one-on-one relationship, there are small disrespectful things that we do in the way we treat each other that I think carry some flavor of violence. And so in the spirit of the way that we did the action, it was, as the action in Standing Rock is, it was to protect life. It was to try to stop the harm. And so our intent was not to harm those folks that have an interest in the Spectra Express pipeline. But despite the fact that they may suffer some financial loss because that pipeline needs to shut down, doesn't justify the harm that's being caused by continuing to burn that tar sands oil. And so I agree, it is a difficult thing, and I think it's very much a personal decision